got all their chords down? Get this show on the road. Got one more coming in? No? All right. Cool. Well, we were wondering when we started this class with 40,000 people, how many would be left? Slowly we're whittling it down. Maybe they're at home in the comfort of their living room today watching. There's a good snow going on, so part of this class is going to be a little bit of review because we've just covered a pile of information, right? Some of you maybe you've got it and you're like, come on, let's get going. But there's just a lot going on. So has everybody successfully played a G chord? Pretty nice and clean. Everybody? Almost? Yes. C chord? Are we getting that? So we're just going to look at those two right now, right? Okay, so the whole purpose is not Ring of Fire. It's every song. And almost every song needs a G and a C in most things that you're going to look at. So the transition between G and C came up last week. Like, hey, how do I transition quickly between chords, right? And what did we talk about? We wanted an anchor, okay? So, but one thing that is important to consider when changing chords is that you don't want to take your fingers too far off the fretboard to transition. So if you notice, if I play a G, you know, I didn't anchor and then like come off again, right? You kind of want to know where your fingers are going. So if you're playing your G like this, there's two ways to play a G. If you hadn't just noticed, you can start with your ring finger on that high chord and drop across. I think that's what we talked about, right? So if I was going to transition to the G, I'm not going to bring my hand all the way up and then all the way down again. That just takes a lot of time, and when you're moving fast with chords, we just don't want to do that. So I'm going to slide my finger back, and if you notice, just when you look at my hand, when I slide back to get it ready for that, in that anchor I'm going to, look where that middle finger went. I mean, it's right there where it needs to be for a C. And in a lot of shapes that we're transitioning to, you have this similarity of where your fingers need to be. So instead of like resetting your hand and coming back down, your fingers may already be pretty close to that position, but just think about the anchor first, and then you might just have to nudge your finger one way or another. Does everybody, can you see what I'm talking about there? And so in the same shape, if I move to a D, I know my anchor's on that third string, second fret, but I'm not going to do this and pull my hand off and then re-anchor. I'm going to slide my finger over slightly, and when I do that, look what happens with that ring finger. It just moves right over with it, and then I just drop this guy down. So I'm gently moving over. I'm not resetting my hand every time, if you will. And there's the tendency when we're playing to reset our hand. And that's the same with chords, scales that we play. If you were every time coming, like you're not gonna be able to go, you know? So the fingers are right in the position they need to be, and it's just moving them. So last week we talked a little bit about, I think, or 2 weeks ago, about pressure, the pressure of your thumb, how that this is a fulcrum on your body, and you can use that to kind of push the guitar into your hand. And that can be a speed thing and a comfort thing. But in chord shapes, the other thing that makes a difference for speed and getting to that chord is intuitively saying like, okay, my anchor point, if I'm on a D, I know I need to shoot for that B string on the first fret, but that doesn't mean I'm going to reset my hand. I'm going to just gently move my hand back. You can barely perceive a movement, right? And then I'm into that shape. I'm kind of sliding where I need to go. This is two purposes for me. So I want you to listen really carefully as I amplify my guitar. You hear all that garbage in there? It doesn't sound good. If I can slide from a D, yes, it's quieter, right? Because I'm kind of muting my strings a little bit as I'm sliding back. And then I also can mute with this hand a little bit. But if I'm going, it's not very clean, it's not very pretty. See what I did? So in keeping this proximity of your hand to the fretboard and the strings in this hand, we can kind of get rid of that unwanted string noise and that kind of stuff. Like that kind of stuff. That's what makes an amateur sound like an amateur, is that kind of stuff. If you can go clean from a G to a C by not moving too much and just kind of shifting your hand, I don't have any noise. And that's like a nuance that nobody really talks about making chords and transitioning. And this again is muscle memory. Like, what does that hand do to keep things quiet? There is no sound in between those things, and there's not a whole lot of movement. My hand's not coming off the fretboard at all. It's right where it needs to be, and I know my anchor point. Okay, so you can't always eliminate all the noise. Sometimes it just happens. I don't care who you're listening to. Because there's just transitions you have to make. Now, I can kind of palm mute, but you're still going to hear it on certain strings. So, just a case in point, a little bit of a review. If you've got your chords, you've got your shapes, you're thinking about your transitions, about how you can keep your hand in place while you move so you're not always doing this all the time, okay? All right, so the second thing I want to cover when we're talking about these chords, let's say G and C, and maybe you've got that down. Does everybody have the transition down pretty easy between G and C? Easy, relatively speaking? No? Nobody? That's all right. You're only on like your third week, right? Fourth week? Probably only your second week of a couple chords. And so, again, one of the things that's going to help that transition, and it depends how you play it. If you're playing the chord the way some books show it like this, look how much more movement I have to get to the C, even with that anchor point. If I play it like this with my pinky here and wrap these two across, I can drop and just bring this back, right? And it looks a lot easier. But I don't want to bog you down with different chord shapes. But remember how I said last time that there's certain shapes the book shows? There's certain chords you're going to look up online that may or may not make sense for your hand size and shape, okay? Now, I didn't show a G this way to a class who doesn't play guitar because maybe your pinky and your ring finger don't separate across the fretboard right now. Maybe you have a little shorter fingers and you can't do that, okay? But if you can do that and just bridge the gap with those two fingers, now all I'm actually doing is shifting those two low strings back one string after I found my anchor, right? So, that being said, there's certain ways we can do it, right? This is just kind of review. But let's say you learned your G and your C transition, but you can't sing Ring of Fire because it's not in the right key. Does anybody know what you would use to cheat to get to the right key? A capo. So when you're looking up your favorite songs, a lot of times, and I'm going to reference Ultimate Guitar again, but pretty much every book that you'll buy, every resource that you'll look up, you know, it's made for those who know their open chords, which is your G's and C's and D's and A's and E's we've been talking about. Well, if it's in the wrong key and it says capo 3, that means you use a capo, which is a clamp that firmly adheres to the fretboard and changes the key that we're in. And so if it says capo 3, of course, we're going to put that on the 3rd fret. If it says capo 2, you put it on the 2nd fret. And so if it says Capo 2, and it's showing you a G, that doesn't mean that you're playing a G. It's a G shape. So if I have a capo on 2, in fact I got one out that I could use, and I put it somewhere and I have no idea where my lovely assistant, okay, is going to bring me a capo. This is great. This is a great program. Thank you. So if I take the capo across my 2nd fret, and I still play that G shape that you learned, right? And so remember when we're playing a G, and we said put our 3rd finger on the 3rd fret. Well, this is no longer the 3rd fret. This is the 1, 2, 3. This is the 3rd fret, because this is pretending to be the top of the fretboard. So it's, just think of that number, 3, 4, 5, 6 is down from where your anchor point is, or your capo, or the nut of the guitar. So if it shows that you put your finger on 3, but it says capo 2, that's 3 from the capo, okay? Because a lot of songs that you're going to look up are capoed. And the reason you see that, sometimes artists play it that way. It's easier for them because listen to the sound difference. So like why a capo versus a bar chord. So here's a G bar chord. That sounds different than an open G. Right? So if I'm playing this kind of hot and heavy versus totally different. And this is almost more percussive. And I can mute it fast by pulling off a little bit. So if you see that, I can cut it by lifting off because I take my pressure off. So it sounds different. So they use a capo to play this chord because those strings still are open. I can play that chord not in this shape with a capo, but it's not going to be ringing and sound like that, okay? But it's most commonly used to change the key for your voice. So oh, it was written in G, C, D, but I needed a little bit in a higher key. G, C, D, C, D. Okay, so now it's different. I'm not actually playing a G. My G was down here, and I moved up a half and then another half, which makes a whole step. So instead of being in G, if our notes go A, B, C, D, G, A, repeat. Now I'm in the key of, I'm playing that as an A, it's not a G. But it doesn't, it matters. But do you understand what I'm saying? So when you're looking at your music that you want to learn, because again, my point isn't to teach you one song or one chord. My point is to kind of show you what's going on with guitar so you can take your favorite song and play it yourself. So when you're seeing on that music, Capo 3, number 1, you don't have to use it on Capo 3. If you look up music that says Capo 3, you can pull that capo off. You don't need to own a capo. Just, if it says Capo 3 and it's showing you a G, you use the G shape as the regular. It just won't be in the right key for the song. So if you go press play on your favorite listening device, it's going to sound lower than it would be. It's going to sound wrong. It's just in a different key. But if you don't have a capo, it's okay. It just won't sound right. There's a lot of songs I play that should be in a different key, and I play them in another key, you know. So, but that's the purpose of the capo. And a couple notes on capos. Just because if you are playing, you want to strum along, most commonly I hear people want to strum and sing at some point. Or if you want to strum and play with other people. So capos, I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but I'm going to put my finger across this, and then I'm going to put a capo. It sounded different, right? This has so much pressure, it's pushing my guitar strings out of tune. Remember how we said when you're forming your chords, if you use too much pressure, you can push it out of tune? Right? A standard Kaiser capo that a lot of people use, and you'll see these all over the place, it's a lot of pressure and it pushes your guitar out of tune. So if you're playing with somebody else whose guitar is perfectly in tune, you're probably going to have to re-capo, put your tuner on, and get that thing back in tune because now it's changed. So you're going to have to retune. Okay, these are courtesy points today. Okay, so it may not sound right when you use the capo because you're out of tune. Got it? Because of all the pressure. Some of the solutions are, we have capos that have adjustable spring tension, so that doesn't happen, so you can put the capo on and have the proper tension, which would be enough tension so you don't get this, and it goes clean, but not enough tension to where it tunes it up. You see, I mean, that's almost a quarter pitch, right? It's very noticeable. And again, where you put your capo depends how much it's going to push it out of tune. If I put it more closer to the fret, like we put our fingers closer to the fret, it'll sound different than if I put it halfway back. You hear that? Because, of course, it's got more, like the bridge has to support more weight of those strings, okay? So I don't want to bore you to death with this, but that's really important stuff, okay? When you're trying to be in a jam or you're trying to play with a capo and you don't know why it doesn't sound right. Again, it might not be you. It might be too much pressure on the capo, okay? Okay, so we've covered the chord shapes and the sound. So one of the things I want to take a minute to do, because a lot of people who play guitar get lost in the theory of guitar. If you've heard of the word music theory, music theory can be daunting. It's a very challenging class in college. But music theory basically is, why do we do what we do in music? How do we write a song? If you are a lyricist or a poet and you wanted to make music, right? Maybe that's some of you out here. You're like, boy, I've got lots of poems. I have no idea what to do. Well, there's a theory behind it. So what I printed today this is going to be a tad bit more advanced, but it's going to inform you a little bit of what's happening in music so that it's not just shapes. And some of you will maybe be inspired to do lead lines. Some will maybe be inspired to want to pick out melodies and write music. If you just want to strum chords and sing along, this will still inform you, because how many times have you heard something like this? Okay, right? Like, in fact, I think Johnny Cash did Walk the Line like that. Right? Like, well, how did he know what notes? Right? Can you just randomly? No, it's not how it works. Like, we don't just get to pick. Unless you're playing jazz, you can just play anything fast enough and it probably works, right? So, you don't even need to know chords, you just move fast. That's not true. So what I printed for you is a C major scale. The C major scale would imply that there's no sharps and flats. When you're looking at a piano, it's all the white notes, okay? Now, the C major scale is, it has certain chords they use. So if you're looking up music and it's the key of C, do you see the chords that I wrote out there? What those stand for is C major. That's the C that you learned, right? You guys all have that C down? So everybody try to play that C for me. I don't have the C on week 4's sheet. It's on week 2's. Let's hear some C's. So kind of get into that shape and then do this. Yeah, there you go. So give me a lot more volume. Don't be shy. see how those, so what I printed is a C major scale, okay? Those notes that you see, does anyone have confusion on how to read that little map I printed out of the fretboard? So you're looking at it like this, right? This is the map, and then it has finger marks on each dot, which means on the first note, you'd go up the scale. So it's in order from the lowest note to the highest note. Does everybody see that? So these are all the notes of a C major scale. Think do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. What you have is the notes do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Okay? So what I wanted to point out before we look at, okay, why do I need to know these? I want you to look at that little map, the first picture. I want you to find me the C chord shape that you learned in that map. Remember the C chord we were just playing? Do you see how the C's, those notes for your C, are found within that chord structure? Now if you look at a G, which is, it's also found in that chord structure. Do you see your G notes on that map? So if you were pretending to play a G, you see how the G notes are found within the scale of that C. Am I way over the top of anyone's head right now? So here's the point of it. When you're in a scale, if we said, well, we're in C, why does that matter? Why are we talking about alphabet? I thought we were talking about notes. Well, the structure, the map, the rules of a key dictate what chords you should play. So if you're wondering, why does an artist, when they're writing, pick G, C, and D for their 1, 4, 5? Well, it's because in the key of G, if that shape, G, the scale of G, also works for C because the notes work for all of the chord shapes in that scale. So the scale, or the pattern of notes that we use, is this set barrier in general music so that we don't go off track. Okay? The benefit is if we're playing the G, I don't have to rehearse. I mean, you should rehearse. But like, if we're jamming, I'm going to show you. I'm going to pick a key. Like those notes all go together. Okay, so that map that you have is the C scale in the open position. The C scale in the open position, when used with the chords that go along with the scale, create this comfort zone where you could sit. So what would happen then if we broke into groups and said, all right, somebody play a C, okay? And somebody played a C and they strummed. And then somebody played the scale that's in front of you. Right? You see that? Like, I just came up with that. But if I used a scale, I didn't come up with that. That's somebody else's song. Right? Like, so you can. sitting in a jam, you're like, hey, let's jam, let's play. Let's show up to a bluegrass jam and see what people are doing. You have the confidence to do that when you know, like, hey, what scale are we in? Well, we're in the C scale. Oh, I learned that. Right? That's just the first two high strings. If you look at your high strings, and if you look at the high E, it's open, and 1 and 3. Do you guys see that on your little map on the high strings? Now I know this is getting repetitive right now, but I want you to listen to what I do with this, with just the high string. And this is how I teach people to improvise. I want to get that high string down first. Okay? Remember the hammer-on pull-offs we did last week? Right? Like that's what am I feeling? Right? Like whatever it is. And then what's the next notes down? Okay, on the B string, you see that it's 2 notes. You guys got those 2 notes down? Play them with me. 2, 3, 4. High B, 1st fret, now the 3rd fret, now the 1st fret, now the 3rd fret. Now let's do this. Try to do that. But here's the thing, even if you get it wrong, there's not going to be any wrong notes. Why? Because we're in the right scale. Right? Like, if somebody plays the 1 and somebody plays the 3 at the same time, it doesn't really matter. Right? So if I go back to my high string, now I know these 2 things, okay? I know this is getting really boring. Whew. I'll switch it up. I'll play a different C. So do you understand how a scale, shape, and the chords in that scale go together to create a recipe for success, no matter where you're at in music, okay? So that's why when somebody says, well, what key are you in? Okay, well, if you knew your C scale, and let's say you only knew those 2, you see the B and the E string there, which is 1st fret, 3rd fret, on the B string, 1st fret, 3rd fret, and then it goes open on the high E, 1st and 3rd. Right? Okay, that's, if it's just that, and I'm playing this, oh, that doesn't sound right at all. And you can almost be listening to music and you can just use, no, that didn't sound right. No, that didn't sound right, and I can pick out what key the song is in just by saying, what does those 5 notes go with everything I'm listening to in that song right now? Does it naturally fit? And you can hear that it fits, okay? So that shape that you see in front of you, that's the C major scale. The way that I was taught to practice my scales is I would sit, and you would go from the bottom to the top in tempo, right? You would just, you would just da da da, and you'd go all the way up and back down. You can do that with a pick. If you do it with a pick, up down up down up down up down up down is a really good rule. Like, or down up down up down up. And you might just want to start with 1 string so you get it down. Right? You see that high string, right? Now, when your fingers wear out from practicing your chords, this is a great dexterity tool because you're not having to press them all down. And so I'm going down, up, 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 down, up with my pick, right? That's my rhythm. Instead of going, that's all down. That doesn't really work that well. So when I'm playing a song and I want to transition chords, right? We were talking about, why do you want to know that if you just want to play along to a song? Well, the reason that I know I can do that is because I know the scale for that. Because I know the scale in G, if I play a D, I can make these little melodies up because I just know where the notes are. And you just figure it out, okay? So if you're in the key of C, I wrote on your sheet all the chords for C major, okay? All of those chords, if you would look them up on your computer, A minor for guitar, okay? Well, the A minor for guitar is very similar in shape to C. If the shape, I barely move my hand, it's very similar, right? And it's really close to a C. So all of these shapes that I wrote on your sheet are true of that scale in the key of C, which doesn't do you any good if you're in the key of G. So you're welcome. We've been learning Johnny Cash in the key of G. So that scale doesn't do you any good whatsoever. Unless, when we switch to the C, guess what? That whole scale applies. So in music, what happens is, if you see a chord shape, okay, and this is important, you see a chord shape, the shape is G. All the notes in the G scale work over the G. If you see a C shape, all the notes work over a C. If you see a D shape, okay, so if you would go home, this is like homework. This is for those of you who want to know this. If you would go home and look up, what is the D scale on guitar? You're going to get a different map. What's the G scale? You're going to get a different map. Now, here's the thing. The map is actually the same on guitar. You just don't know it. And here's the revelation. You guys learned the A, right? Who knows what an A bar chord or an A chord is? Not an acorn, an A chord. You got your A, these three notes. It's it was on maybe week 2. Okay. This is an A. But if I took my finger and I capoed it, what did I say that it would then do? It ceases to become an A, even though the shape is the same that I'm playing. Does that make sense? I'm playing the same shape. But now instead of an A, I've moved up 2 frets, which makes it a B. I went from an A, halfway up, it's a B flat. Another step up is a B. Well, if I move it up, that becomes a C. That's a D, right? Like, I'm just going up the alphabet. That's an E. Seems silly, I know. F. G. Okay? So the chords that you've been learning right now, the chord names that you've been learning are all over the place. When you look at this guitar, and again, my purpose is to teach you to kind of teach yourself, right? But when you look at this guitar and all these things going on, it's not like a piano. You look at a piano and it repeats itself, okay? You got 2 black keys, you get some white keys, 3 more black keys, 2 more, 3 more, 2 more, 3 more, right? You can easily see each octave. That's what we call it. An octave is 8 notes. Octagon, octopus, October, that's the 10th month. It doesn't make any sense. Somebody should fix that.
It used to be.
It used to be the 8th? All right, well, I haven't researched that. So octagon, right? 8, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, right? The 8, the octave is a note higher, okay? So when we're dealing with these things, right? This, if I go, you see this 12th fret here on your guitar? That is an octave higher than this. The same note's an octave higher. If I take my whole notes, you hear how it's the same note, it's just an octave higher? There's octaves all over the place. But on a guitar, it's like, I don't know where I'm at. Right? It's just like it's this whirl. On a piano is easy to do. But the hard part on the piano is if somebody switches keys, now all your key shapes switch, and that's really hard to know where you're at. On a guitar, it's really easy, right? We talked about a capo. Well, on that app on Ultimate Guitar, you'll see something that says transpose. Transpose means I want to put it in a different key from where I'm at. If you go transpose +1, we go up a pitch. Transpose down is down a pitch. So on the app, if you're on a computer, you're trying to learn, you're trying to sing along, it's just not in your key, we would either transpose down or transpose up. So when you hit the transpose on Ultimate Guitar, it will change the chord name, and then you may not know the chord name, right? If I transposed up, and now suddenly the chord name is A, but we haven't learned all of the chords in the key of A, you're kind of host. You can't go to that jam and play, right? Unless you have a capo. Then we put our capo, and now it works because I use all the shapes that you just learned. All right, so that's the difference between transposing and capoing. When you capo, you can use all the same chords that you learned before in the song that you learned at home, and then you can take it wherever setting you are and be like, hey, what key are you in? And somebody can help you find the right place for your capo. But the cool thing about guitar is, if I learn any structure, you hear how that interval was the same all the way up the neck. So if I learned it in the key of G, and I was in the key of A, right? It moves all over the place. That's why this capo works. It's patterns. So your scales on guitars are notes. They truly are notes, and there's notes that can go along with it. But it's a pattern. So if I go back to my B and my E string that I showed you guys, right? That pattern works. That's your C scale in this position. But if I was in the key of D, well, D is 2 frets up, right? 2 whole tones up, or 2 half tones up. Then I could come up here. The pattern's the same. And no matter what key I'm in, right, it moves. So if I know that pattern, if I've got that pattern that you have right there locked down in my brain, I can move it up and down the fretboard, make it sound however I want. There's a pattern for every chord. So if you didn't think you had enough information to study, there's a lot of chords, and you can look up the scale for every single one, and that won't do you hardly any good at all right now. Okay, so that's not my point. But I want you to understand a little bit of music theory on guitar. So the way, like in the C chord, if you played a C at home, and you pick any notes on that road map up top on the top left image, you can play those notes over that, and it's going to sound cool. Okay, so you've noticed I have a looper pedal. The reason I set this up is because one of the ways that I've gotten really comfortable with this concept is playing a chord. Oops. Hold on. Oh, that's wrong. Right? So you don't have to be in a jam. You can do this in the comfort of your own home. Right? And you can just practice your... Right? You can practice with a rhythm and hear, okay, what goes with that? What doesn't go with that? Where does that fit? Where doesn't it fit? And I find that really useful. So when we're going... Right? That's how we know what those passing notes are. So we talked about moving from chord to chord. How do we do it, right? We anchor and we move our hand. But if you think about the C and you look at that road map, and let's say we're on a G. Well, we know in the key of C, you know those notes now, right? You understand what they are? Have I lost anybody? Okay. Remember the key of C, that map right there? You see the high notes? Do you understand what I did there? Okay. So if I'm playing Johnny Cash, but I know I want to get to a C note, I'm playing passing notes on the scale on my way to the right chord. And you hear that in music. You hear these passing notes. And when you're in the right key, now I played a C scale in the key of G for those of you online people who are watching this and you really know what's going on. But again, it works if you know where you're going, okay, which is the hard part. So if you're trying to write a song and you're using it in the key of G, all you have to do is look up what are the chords in the key of G. The computer will tell you what chords they are. Right? And then look up those chords if you have to, or have a chord chart. We sell chord charts, they're cheap. So if you want to be a songwriter and you want to create, all you have to do is look up those chords. They all go together, right? I know G, C, D, all go together. A minor, E minor, all these chords go together and I can just pick where I want to go. And they take me somewhere musically that I feel that I need to go. The chords help inform the passing notes in the melody line. Okay, so on a C with that scale in front of you, I can make a melody line with those chords in front of me. And I know that my melody will be nice and work with that C chord, right? You know, I can just make anything up, I can pick the pattern, I can skip notes. There really aren't any rules when you follow the rule of the scale when you're getting going at that level. So does that make sense in terms of the theory that's happening on guitar? Because I feel like as a young player early on, it was just how do people know where to go? This is a very intimidating thing. But there's safety within the context of the scale. And the thing about a scale, if you went home and you said, okay, I love Ring of Fire and that's what I'm going to learn. And I want a solo to Ring of Fire. Well, what key is the Ring of Fire in? If you don't know, Google it. It's in the key of G, okay, right? For this example, that's what I'm playing. And then you could look up what scale is the key of G. And you might get one scale. Oh. But I also know that you'll get the entire road map. You'll get everything. You get all the notes on the fretboard that's in that key. And any of those notes you can play. Which again isn't that useful in my mind. I mean, it does help. But you know how on this sheet I only have part of a scale? I'm not using the whole fretboard. I've only gotten you there's 3 frets we're using plus the open note. The scale exists here, 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 here. And remember how I said one finger for every fret? So I think in terms of a box. It's a box that I move around. So I have a box for one shape, a box for another shape, a box for another shape. And these are all ways we break up the fretboard. So this is kind of a lot of information, but the point is if you want to write music and you look up a box for each of your fingers, you can know where to go. And you just get creative and you try it. But that's what we're seeing when we're looking at guitarists who are moving all over the fretboard. This isn't some intimidating thing. Trust me, there's a box that they're using where they know that they can go safely and play, no matter what. And there's boxes for the blues that I can play that C. How did I know that? Well, I know the rule of that scale. So why do you take private lessons? Why maybe, if any of that has any interest, it's really fun to be able to sit with somebody who can kind of take you down that journey. And so I used a looper kind of for my journey, but when you were teaching, if you teach a baby how to talk, do you tell them, hey, listen, when you learn your ABCs, front and back, and you can skip notes with your ABCs, then we'll have a conversation. Like, you don't say that, right? Like, whoa, 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 go take some lit. Some English lit, and then we'll talk, kid. No, you're like goo goo ga, right? You're like making up noises, and you're encouraging them to explore voicings, right? So you might find that you're terrible. So play to your favorite music with the scale, right? Let's say you love Blackbird, right? And you're like, what key is Blackbird in? And you look it up, and you find out what key is Blackbird in. And then you're like, I'm gonna play the scale over the top of my favorite song because I looked up the C scale. I'm not sure. Is Blackbird in the key of C? That doesn't work. Bruce, what key is Blackbird in? G? G. That's the fastest way to learn your scales. See how that works? I have never done that before. Obviously, because I didn't know what key Blackbird is in. Right? Big surprise. So in music, that's the kind of the fun thing about not being afraid to sit with somebody. There's so many people, whatever. It's like, that's how you learn how to talk. You make really bad sounds at first, and you figure it out, but now you understand the safe context of where we can play, right? You can look up your favorite song, and if you want to learn how to play it, and you don't even have your chord transitions down, that's okay. Look up what the scale, multiple scales, and try to play along and just pick out the melodies. Eventually, your fingers will figure out where they're going, And what I would encourage you, the rule is, well, what I like to do, up and down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, and a finger for every fret. Remember, that's a little bit of review. When we're doing that kind of stuff, pick it out. And the same thing works if you're playing a scale or a chord. Like it's just faster. So hopefully that kind of gives you some framework when we're talking about chords and we're talking about all these notes, right? The other day we played the, right? Well, some of those notes aren't in that G scale, right? They're passing notes. Because the G scale, but we played, right? That's not in a G. This is a G chord. Not. Well, why does that work? Okay? So, remember what I said, the safe place to sit versus jazz is like all these kind of crazy notes? You can do all kinds of neat stuff with passing notes, which are notes that aren't actually there, but that's the stuff that you hear that makes your ear go, whoa, what did I just hear? Okay? And those inflections are what the difference between maybe a more Spanish sound, a soulful bluesy sound. They're taking and they're just borrowing notes. And there's even a rule for that. And I'd bore all of you to death. But that's the context of safety that we learn our chords in, you know? And so I would encourage you as players, you know, don't be afraid to look up that scale. So you've got that C scale. I've got the chords there for that C scale. You certainly could pick one of those chords. There's an E minor chord. The E minor chord is just this, right? I think we played E before, but the E minor is just 2 strings. And if I play that E minor, it kind of works, but you see not everything works, right? There's some fighting there. So explore it with the scale, get the scale down, a finger for every note, you know, whatever it is, and then work with it. So that's your kind of key to soloing and what's going on. As far as review, leaving this journey theory, perhaps. Did anybody have any questions there where you're like, dude, you lost me? Let's go over that one more time. Anybody? Don't be afraid if I did, because that was a lot of info. All right. Is anybody really struggling? Does anybody want an extra breakout session with chord formations because you're struggling in a really frustrating way? The F major? Good question, love it. So this is a great thing and worth talking about. F major really stinks. That's like the first bar chord people show people almost. It's called a bar chord. So the implication is, I'm going to make this, why does that look like that? So do you remember your E chord? Did anybody play an E ever? Did we go over that? If you look up an E chord, okay, the F is just the E slid up, everything 1 fret. But with the E, all the other notes are being held by the nut of the guitar. When you slide it up a half fret, your finger is making up for all those notes, which really is hard and painful. Now, if I used a capo instead of my finger, that's what it is, okay? It's an E shape. We call it an E shape that's moved up. So a lot of beginners really struggle to play that, and some people don't bother. Remember how I said you don't have to worry about playing all the notes? Some people just play the top 5 notes. So they'll take this finger, their pointer finger, and they'll put it over those first two high frets. And then they'll drop their middle finger down on the 3rd fret, and then wrap their other two, and only play it like that, which still isn't necessarily easy. It's a lot of notes getting pushed down. Okay? So some people play it like that. It's not an easy chord. There's a lot going on there. And I never play the F like that. I'll usually default to something else. Right? Like there's F's all over the place, but some people only leave out this, and they just go these two, and then they'll wrap down the next fret on the 3rd string, and then use that finger, the ring finger on the 3rd fret, 3rd string, and they only play that. And that's fine. But it's still strenuous. Like this is why I didn't start with an F chord. And right now, you're really gonna struggle with it. There you go. You kind of got to make a guitar face to do it. It's like, people wonder why people make faces, right? You either really feel it or it's really uncomfortable. So, or maybe both. So that F, and don't get too hung up on it, but remember how I said, like, you might need to sit down while you're watching TV, get into a shape, and it might really hurt, and you just hold it for a while? That might be your F chord. It's a bugger, and there's other ways, like we're not going to get into, but the F is really difficult. That's just all there is to it. And I will tell you, when you see me doing this, that's an F chord moved up 2 frets to a G chord, because like with guitar, this is bonus round for those of you who stuck through this. Good job for your tolerance. So, going up in that shape, it's an E chord. This is an E, right? That's an E shape. If I go up, F sharp, G, G sharp, A, and on and on and on and on and on. So, when some people use capos, I don't use capos. I just don't mind suffering a little bit with bar chords because I've been doing it a while. My hand's a little, it's used to it. And so that's opened the whole fretboard up to me. So you're like, what do you do with all these frets? Like, well, if you just keep a shape and you just keep moving up, it's the chord that you'll want to use. And I use it for color, right? So like, it doesn't get any easier, but the G is way easier to play than an F. Why? Because the F, remember how in the very first session I said, is your guitar too big for you? Is the tension too high? Is your position wrong? If your guitar's down like this, and you're trying to play that F, good luck, right? It hurts. This, up a little higher, is way, way easier, okay? Because you're not straining in that position. So get a guitar strap, like this young man, if you want to play an F, you can lay that finger, right, all the way across. All the way across the first fret. Just try to push it down and get all the notes. Try that. Even harder. Make a guitar face. It's really hard, isn't it? Okay, and some of that you can like push with your finger and push this against your chest. I can't do it all the way. It's a hard chord. Okay, so let yourself off the hook if you can't play that chord right now, because this is like asking yourself to do gymnastics 4 weeks in a doing splits in gymnastics class. Like, it's just really hard. So don't get too hung up. Maybe just play part of it. Right? So one other thing, since we're going into the picking, when you hear this, I'm doing partial strumming and partial picking. I'm hitting the root note, down, up, down, up, down. So I'm coming down on my bass string of the chord, I'm on a G. Okay, down, So if you have a pick and you kind of wonder how people sound like they're playing a bass line while they're playing chords, and like Ring of Fire can be a really good example. I'm going downstroke on my bass, and then I'm coming up. And I'm just being very intentional about lowest string, next lowest string, back to the E, A, and that is a great exercise to practice. See? And you see how you can get that. The scale thing, right? The passing notes. So we're doing bass note and maybe upstroke or downstroke. And I'm just up and down, up and down. I'm specifically training my hand to get those bass notes. Now, if you're using your fingers and I'm pulling up on all the strings, right, to get the bass. Still picking those off. So you see people use thumb picks. And if you like the idea of a thumb pick, get a thumb pick. I don't like the idea of a thumb pick. I don't know where it's going. I don't really use it. I either use my pick or fingers. You know, remember I said pretend like you're using a pick? You know, but that's not as precise. There it is. So remember I said about anchoring? So you know where you're going? So all those cowboy songs, like it's pretty instrumental, no pun intended. You know, about all that folk music, all that cool music you want to listen to, that you want to play, muscle memory says you have to go slow. The precision. Don't be slamming your hand all over the place. This is like, take your time to learn where you're going. Okay? So there you go. That's all I have. I mean, it's a lot of info. Any other questions? Cool. So, as a quick plug, once you are starting to learn your chords, I've mentioned that I like practicing to a looper pedal. For any of you singer-songwriters out there, or if you want to be a singer-songwriter, one of the coolest things that I think about having a looper pedal is just being able to do things that you didn't ever think you were capable of, and like write songs and create music in a way that keeps you practicing longer. So I showed you how to arpeggiate your chords, meaning one finger at a time, right? If I go back to that easy D, and then maybe I go to a G, back to a D, to C, the scale works? I'm just in the key of G. I've got freedom of knowing, right? There's a lot of freedom in discipline. When you have the discipline of the scale, you can go wherever you want. You know that you can go there safely. So you can see why I love a looper pedal, right? Like you get just lost. You can just do that for hours and it's pretty. And all I did was arpeggiate a scale to make it sound really pretty. And there's a lot of beauty and simplicity when it comes to guitar, you know. So hopefully that helps, and we'll see you next week if you all stick in there.